We're talking with Rauland Whiteis of San Diego, California, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Ron, start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
Chicago, Illinois in 1946. We moved to Indianapolis when I was 2.
Okay.
And from the age of 3 all the way up from there, I didn't really have any parental supervision. I used to wander the neighborhood. I did what I pleased. Really never got the memo on religion or anything like that.
Okay. Well, were your parents both working, or?
My mother was deeply depressed, and my father was working all the time as the head of gluten extraction in Indianapolis.
Okay. And then did you have brothers or sisters, or?
Actually, I had 3 brothers and 2 sisters.
And were they older or younger?
2 older brothers, 1 younger brother, and 2 younger sisters.
Okay.
So I'm kind of right in the middle.
All right. And where did you go to high school?
I went to Arsenal Tech High School in Indianapolis. It was a vocational high school, 76-acre campus.
Mm-hmm.
Very large.
All right. And when did you finish high school?
In 1966. I was supposed to finish in 65, but I took a year off to go to the movies. I figured out the system. I worked it so I never got in trouble, got caught for a whole year.
You just kind of didn't go to school?
I went every 3rd day. Because after the 3rd day, they had to get a note from a doctor. So I went every 3rd day. And then I took the rest of the time off. I had a really good time.
Okay.
But it mostly is because they kept sticking me in vocational classes, and I hated it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't. And I was dyslexic. I didn't do well in school.
Okay. Now, were you diagnosed as dyslexic, or?
Not until I got to college, and the psychology teacher was talking about all this stuff, and he said, "Now don't begin to think that you're part of that." And I asked him afterwards, and he asked me a few questions, and then after a while he said, "You're dyslexic. That's what's wrong with you. You're not stupid." And they gave me an IQ test, and I scored 126. But the one they gave me in 6th grade, I didn't even make it to 100 because I couldn't read.
Okay. So how did you wind up getting into college?
I wanted something different than the life I had.
Okay.
I grew up in a very poor, and I don't know where the idea came from, but I decided I wanted to know everything. I wanted to know the world.
Okay.
And I thought that would give me the world. It didn't, but it taught me how to find out what I needed to know.
All right. So where did you go to college?
I went to Southwest Texas State University. It's now called Texas State University.
Okay. How did you wind up there?
I came home from Vietnam and served my last 6 months at Fort Hood.
Okay.
I met a woman in Temple, Texas, and I don't know, I didn't think I was going to get married, but I thought this might be a good bet, and so we got married.
Okay.
Her brother was David Garcia of ABC News.
Okay. But that's coming after your time in the Army.
Yeah.
But now you graduate from high school in 66?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what did you do after that?
I worked for American Fletcher National Bank. I was doing computer stuff, check processing and balancing and accounts.
So you could work with the machines and things, you just didn't read well?
Yeah, I didn't have any problem with numbers, just reading.
Okay. All right. And then is this what you were doing until Uncle Sam came looking for you? Or?
Yeah. They threw me back the first 2 times because, like I said, I was only about 130 pounds, and I was 6'3", or 6'2".
Yeah.
I gained another inch. So that was fine with me because I didn't want to go over there, and I was pretty much a wimp.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. And what did you know about Vietnam at the time?
Not very much. Not very much. I was too busy, trying to figure out my life. So I really didn't think about it, other than the fact that I didn't want to go.
Okay. And so now when you finally do get the call, so when do you actually enter the Army?
I entered it in July of 23rd of '69.
Okay. And where did they send you for basic training?
Down in Kentucky at Fort Knox,
Okay.
and then down to Louisiana for AIT.
All right. Now you said you were not you were not an athlete.
No.
Okay. So what was basic training at Fort Knox like for you?
Like the death march at Battalion. Every morning you have to go out and run a few miles. And at the end of that, we're supposed to eat, and I couldn't. So I became even skinnier.
Did you eventually get into shape or get stronger?
Well, I found that there was a resilience in me that I hadn't known before, that I would not give up, especially when they would march us down to the rifle range every day, down Misery Hill, and march us back up. And it just broke your heart because you think you saw the top, and when you got to there, it turned and went further, and it kept turning and going further, and everybody, half the company dropped out. I wouldn't quit. I wouldn't quit. I didn't know that about me. I just wouldn't quit. When I got to the top, I thought I was going to just keel over dead. I couldn't see, I couldn't hear, moisture coming out of my eyes and mouth and nose and everything. I was pathetic, but I wouldn't give up. And you know, I wrote about that because by the end of basic, the last time I walked up that hill, I didn't break a sweat. You know?
And did you eventually adjust so you could eat?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, how did the drill instructors treat you during this process?
Well, we had a few that was treated us badly, but ours was, they recognized that most of us were a little bit older, and said, look, if you just try, we're not going to harass you like that. And it was a good thing because we wouldn't have put up with it. You know, you can get a 17, 18-year-old, but when you get to be 22,
So they actually had a company or a platoon of you that were mostly older that they put together?
Yeah, ours, I don't know how it happened, but, well, kind of, a lot of us, there was 4 different things, and a lot of us got to be every 4th number, so we would be together.
Okay.
We figured out, okay, squeeze in line every 4th person, and we were all together.
All right. So you found your own way there. Okay. So now, and then what about the, okay, so the discipline stuff wasn't quite as bad maybe as it might have been in another unit or another platoon?
There was one that they replaced the drill sergeant because he got out of hand. And had some blanket parties and stuff. And see, I'd have just killed his ass. I would have at that time. I figured I was going to die. I'm going to Vietnam and I'm going to die. I won't be back.
Okay.
You know? So I don't have to put up with that.
All right. In the meantime, you survived basic training. And then off to Fort Polk, Louisiana then for your AIT. Okay, and what was that like?
Wet, I mean dry and dusty and just more of the same stupid stuff. And then I got a chance to go to APC training, and I went to that back in Fort Knox again.
Okay, and then explain what that is.
That's an armored personnel carrier, how to drive one, how to drive it across water, how to swim it.
Okay.
And then when I got to Vietnam, they put me in the infantry.
All right. So was the APC training on top of the infantry training at Fort Polk? So you basically had 3 stages of training rather than just 2.
Well, prolong it going. Why not?
Okay. Now at Fort Polk, how was that different from Fort Knox in terms of what you were doing?
I think that they were a little less intense in Fort Polk. And they were willing to listen to the men. And one of the men went down and wanted to see the commanding officer and said, the food here is awful. And he came down and tried it and raised holy hell. And then he came down there every day to ask, is this good? Is it good enough? You know, got any complaints? Tell me. And we had good food from then on. You know.
All right, so your experience of the Army has allowed for some pushback.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, how did the APC thing happen? Were you just...
They asked if anybody was interested in signing up, and I signed up. I didn't think they'd call me, but they said yeah. So then they shipped me up there, and I learned how to drive one of those big. It was fun. It was fun.
All right.
You know.
So you just get to play with big machines, basically.
Yeah.
And how long were you then doing that?
I think that was like a 6-week course or 5 weeks. I don't know. It wasn't very long.
Okay.
You know.
All right. So when did you finish that?
Sometime in early part of December, I think, because that meant I had a month leave.
Yeah.
And then I had to report back out in California on January, I want to say the 12th.
Okay.
You know, but they just processed us, put us on a plane, flew us to Japan, or Alaska, Japan, and then Vietnam.
Okay. Was it a military plane or a chartered civilian plane?
I don't know. It was a pretty big plane. There was no first class.
Yeah.
They wouldn't let us off, and it was a little disheartening when we got to Japan and all the crew got off.
Mm.
And then flew us to Vietnam. You know.
Okay. And where did you land in Vietnam?
I want to say up near Hue or Da Nang. Da Nang, I think.
Da Nang, quite possibly.
Yeah, Da Nang.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what happens to you when you get off the plane?
They put us in some crappy barracks, and that's when I found out that I should have brought money, because people were having little quiet meetings with the people who were assigning jobs, and I snuck around and looked and saw they were passing money, and I thought, why didn't I get the memo on this? I could be in Saigon, you know, in a comfortable berth.
And what did you get instead?
I got to go to Hue, and then up near the I'm trying to think, it was Fort Campbell Firebase, that was up near Quan Tri.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure there's Camp Carroll, but that's a little bit farther inland.
No, this was out.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. But based on, okay, well, what unit were you joining?
the 101st Airborne Division.
Okay. And when you first come up to join the 101st, do they give you some kind of orientation before you go to your unit?
Yeah, they had, we'd be on call all night long at perimeter, and then they'd have some classes, and I fell asleep in one, and the lieutenant gave me a grenade to handle and took the pin out, said, now you won't fall asleep. And I said, boy, you really are the stupidest motherfucker I've ever seen in my life, because when I fall asleep, I won't know. You all will be dead.
So what happened to the hand grenade?
Well, he was very nervous and cut the lesson short so he could get it back and put the pin back in it. But I thought that was stupid,
Mm-hmm.
you know? I could have fallen asleep and killed everybody there.
All right. Now, did they teach you anything useful in that training?
No. No, not at all.
Okay.
All conventional, not jungle.
All right. So you get a few days of that, and then what specific unit do you join?
They sent me out to the, I think his 2nd Battalion of the
Yeah.
506.
Okay, 506 Regiment.
Yeah.
Okay, and then which
And,
company?
Company B.
Okay.
And the captain there took one look at me and said something disparaging and get rid of him, along with that other one too, because they don't look fit. He was a gung-ho Rambo type, and so they shipped me off. This was a lucky thing,
Mhm.
you know, because they shipped me off to a bunch of short-timers, and I begged them to show me everything they knew about staying alive, because they survived the Ashaw Valley and they must know something, and they did.
Okay, let's just explain this a little bit. So you go in, was the company in the field, or were they on a...
Yeah, they were in the field.
Okay.
On the
So-
hilltop.
So what was the company commander, he just didn't want to look at you, or? He was
No, he said something about, what the fuck is this crap here, you know?
Okay,
Get rid of
but
it.
he wasn't, they didn't actually
He
send
wanted
you-
robust men to go out and fly out at a moment's notice to fight.
Sure, okay.
And I didn't look the type.
Yeah. Well, that part I get. I'm just kind of wondering, did he expect you to be sent back to the rear, or?
No, just sent me to a platoon that wasn't doing anything, got me
Okay.
out of the way.
Oh, okay. So you moved off, but then that's the point where you kind of connect with guys
It
who've been
was
there a long
very
time.
lucky. They taught me everything I needed to know. And I used that information to stay alive.
Okay. What kinds of things were they teaching you?
How to not make a trail, how to quietly go through, how to spot if there's any kind of mines or booby traps or anything like that, how to read a map, how to be able to look at that map and see the best route from place to place. It's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
How I could take them up and down a mountain instead of down any path. How to train everybody around me to hand signals so that they wouldn't make any noise. I felt like I was following my father's Indian tradition that you go through the land and never make a mark.
Mm-hmm.
And it was great. And I took over my platoon because of that. I was a private and I felt I knew more. I wanted to live, and so I took over the platoon Walk Point for 9 months.
Okay. At what point did you start doing that?
Well, as soon as those guys got dropped to go home, and they reorganized and put me in another platoon.
Okay. All right. So.
And when I say I controlled it, I did. The sergeant was short timer. He didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime we got somebody that couldn't get with the program, I had the company shift them off, and somebody else could come into the platoon. You know.
Okay. All right. So, reminder. Okay. So, when did you arrive in Vietnam?
I arrived there about the 12th of January, and about
That's right. Okay.
by the end of January, I think I was in another platoon.
Okay.
I learned quite a lot. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying this is what happened, and at the time I'd never led anybody. I'd never taken control. I'd never.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, there's a different person here, who thinks, okay, if I'm going to live, I better have a hand in this.
Okay. Now, did you have a lieutenant commanding the platoon?
No, we just had a sergeant.
Okay. All right. So he was supposed to be providing the leadership and.
Yeah, but he was a short timer, and I think he kind of realized I knew more or something. He didn't. I don't know why. He just let me take charge of everything.
And pretty much the rest of the guys were new guys now?
I'm sorry, what?
Were the rest of the guys new guys after that first group left?
Some of them were fairly new along with me, and some of them were there a while, but they stuck to me.
Okay.
They stuck to me, and I didn't find out too much later. I felt my mission was to stay, number one, me alive, and then protect and keep everybody in my platoon. Nobody was killed, nobody was injured. We weren't run over. One of the few platoons that were never run over by the enemy. And I just chose to travel everywhere that would be unlikely to run into any kind of trouble that would hurt anybody.
Okay. So at this point in time, your platoon is normally operating by itself?
And then every so often, after 2 or 3 weeks, we'd meet up with the company, and then we.
Okay. Now, what area were you operating in January, February, early in the year?
Early in the year, we were down in the lowlands, just by the mountains, by the foothills.
Okay.
So we did have some hilly country there, but we weren't up in the mountains.
All right. And was there much enemy activity at that point?
No,
Okay.
really not. And then in March, we went up there and was put on the fire base to guard it while they opened up that fire base. I don't remember the date of it, but I know it was in March.
Okay.
So, but then we were off again, roaming around the mountains.
All right. Well, your company, I mean, I guess the 2nd Battalion 506, which you were with, you were with them, and they had the job of setting up a fire base on the hill that comes to be known as Ripcord. And the first attempt was in March, and A Company went in, and they were not successful. April 1st, B Company was sent there.
And that was it. I thought it was March, but it was.
Oh, okay. So
you lose track of time.
Okay. So what do you remember about that? Did you actually land on Ripcord yourself?
Yeah.
Okay. So what happened that day?
I don't remember much of anything except us trying to find a a bunker, and I had seen the one down at the very end being built, and I chose that one to be down at the very end because it was a better built bunker than any of the others.
Okay.
And then just guarding the place until they took us off.
Okay, well that's later, because the 1st of April, B Company lands and then they leave at night. So you're just there on the hilltop for a day and they do not establish the base. So you don't remember that. Where were you, do you think, April 1st, 1970?
Not sure. I remember that they were building a lot of the bunkers when we got out there. They weren't finished, and they were bringing in cannons,
Yeah.
the 105s and the.
Okay. Well, that would come later once they'd actually taken over the hilltop. But B Company was on and off in the space of about a day, and then they were back patrolling the jungle again.
Yeah, I remember we were just shuffling. It didn't make much sense to me, but
Okay.
you go where you're told.
Okay, so he wasn't really registering with you at that point what exactly was
No.
going on. You were on a hilltop, then you left the hilltop, and then you were patrolling, and then you come back later, and the base is now under construction, and you wind up being kind of on perimeter guard for that. But when you're patrolling around in the jungle, around the time when they're before you wind up with the regular duty up on the base, was there much enemy activity out there then?
No, really, there was. Well, a few others run into it.
Mm-hmm.
Quite frankly, I tried to avoid that as much as possible.
Okay. Now, was the company still operating mostly in platoons at this point?
I remember still being in platoons and running around on some of the mountains and everything, and meeting up with every so often with the company,
Rest of the company.
and then dividing up and going again.
Okay. And let's see. So how long were you spending out in the field at one time?
Well, trying to remember. Pretty long time. We didn't much get stand downs.
Okay.
I'd heard of them, but we didn't get them. I got a stand down because I got cellulitis in my knee, puffed up real big, and they put me on it was foggy, you couldn't see anything, and they had a copter come in there, put me on that slick and sent me back, and I thought, well, this might kill me, fast. And then the doctor said, you must stay in bed and you must have them bring food to you, and I thought, I'm not doing that, And then the sergeant, the company sergeant, put me on the garbage truck. You could at least work.
Mm-hmm.
And the physician came by, and the doc saw me and made me get down and raise holy hell about it. And that's when I found out that I could easily lose my leg, because I had to go every morning and have a shot of penicillin. And that's so that's when the sergeant just took a dislike to me. I think I thought I ratted him out, but I didn't. It was just a coincidence. The doctor saw me and said, "What the hell are you doing up there? Get down."
Right.
So
this is just one of those kinds of infections you get in the jungle, and
I don't even know what caused it.
Yeah.
Might have been a scratch, who knows? But it just swelled up like a melon,
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize it was that bad. I just thought, well, you take a little penicillin, you'll be fine.
Okay. Well, that potential. I mean, that might have been when the company first went to Ripcord.
It could have been.
Because it was fairly dramatic in most of their stories. But if you weren't there, then
I don't remember it, so it probably, I was
Yeah.
back at base for about 2 or 3 weeks.
yeah, that could be right in there. Because then eventually, B Company does go there, and they are the ones who do much of the perimeter guard work.
Mhm.
And your recollection is going to that base and picking out your bunker.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, describe a little bit then what the firebase looked like when.
Well, it was pretty barren. They had all kinds of bunkers built, various, construction. I picked the one that was built the best. And there was a lot of traffic in and out. And we had a Chinook helicopter shot down bringing in ammo. They managed to get over to the pad and sat down, and then they come out and took it away. They don't learn anything. The reason the Firebase blew up was because they shot one down over it, and it blew up, and the ammo dump blew up, and the mortar pits went up, and then the 105s went up. It took 11 hours of concussions before it finally was finished. Before that, we were on Hill 805 as a company. We took that hill because they were they were using it to shoot onto the fire base.
Mm-hmm.
So we took it away from the enemy. We had a, what do you call that? We went in mass in helicopters and went in and
Okay. Combat assault.
combat assault. And we took that. Some interesting things happened up there at the time. One, we were constantly getting struck by lightning. I mean, one time I thought there was an explosion. Another second later, it ran up my legs and made my heart beat funny, and then ran back down again. And I thought, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't get in the foxhole because it was filled with water, and I was afraid the ones that were in the foxholes when that hit got it the worst.
Mm-hmm.
So I laid down beside it. A mortar came in, and there was a great big flat face boulder, and it hit the boulder and went up like a ball off a step right over the top of me. And I woke up to that, and rolled over and and three of them, the commander and the medic and I think the lieutenant came rushing out there because they thought I'd be dead.
Mm-hmm.
And they couldn't find a scratch on me. They're like, this can't be happening, it hit right like between me and that door.
Mm-hmm.
It was that close, Another time, the company commander came over to me and said, get your guys together. And I thought, get your guys together? I'm a private.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, and go down there and check that out because that's where they're sneaking in on us. And I didn't want to take that order, and I didn't want to disobey it either. So I had a thump come with me, which is like a shotgun but shoots grenades.
Yeah.
And I went to the edge of the thing, and I imagined a grid, and I started firing them further and further out.
Mm-hmm.
The company commander comes over and says, what the hell are you doing? And I said, making a patch, sir. And he thought about it, and he said, carry on. And it turned out really good because when we went down there, they had the Viet Cong had dropped all their weapons, including a machine gun, and ran off.
So there were Vietnamese trying to get into the perimeter?
Oh yeah, every night.
Okay.
We didn't fire back. We didn't let them mark our positions.
So
We had a lieutenant that was great with artillery,
Okay.
and he would call it in on them every night. Close.
Yeah, so they basically said, would they get into the wire, or were they outside of the wire when
Well,
you
we
get
didn't put wire up on Hill 805.
Oh, that's 805, okay, I'm sorry. I was thinking of Ripcord itself, but you're talking
No,
805.
we
yeah.
hadn't gone yet.
Yeah.
And Company C decided that they wanted off Ripcord because they were constantly getting mortars in on them. And I don't know how they arranged it, but we got notice that I think Company A took over for us. We went over the fire base, took over for them,
Right.
walked over, and they went off into the jungle.
Okay. All right. So yeah. So you have your field time with around Hill 805. When did you have any Vietnamese scouts with you?
I had a scout earlier than that for a very short time. I don't know what happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wanted him.
Okay.
So I said, okay, you can hang with me, and he used to cook up all kinds of strange food and share it with me because he wanted me to taste this and try this. And it could have been dog for all I know, but it was better than sea rations.
Okay. And was he any good as a scout?
I really don't see that he had any input whatsoever. He was just sort of there.
Right.
And he didn't advise me to anything. He figured I was doing pretty good, I guess. I don't know. I remember that time that I used to keep all the food that they sent out where other GIs threw some of their least liked food away.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we ran out of food and everybody was real hungry and they'd come over and want some food, I'd give them that food. And also I was known as the library because I carried several books. And people would bring me a book and they would exchange it for another book. Because sometimes you'd be out there and you'd be camped out there and no place to go and nothing to do, and they would read for a little while, you know, to take their mind off things. And you didn't get to read very often, but you know, it was there. And so I carried a lot of books. Books were precious to me at that time. Yeah.
Okay. You were able to read them?
Well, not very much at a time, you know. I remember that when we were, when the firebase was exploding, I had a book called How Green Was My Valley. I still have it. I haven't read it since. But I would talk to myself, if I could just read one more page and then think about what to do, it would keep me from panicking. Because they would come around and jump into my little pit in front of my bunker, and you could see in their eyes, they were like some psychotic horse in a burning barn. And I tried to talk them into coming in and staying, but after a little while they'd jump up and run off the mountain. You know, so I pretty much was on my own, but it used to scare the hell out of me when they would just jump in.
All right, pause there.
You know, you could see that you couldn't reason with them. You could see that they were beyond reason, fully panic mode. And every time it made me panic and made me feel like I should run too. And I thought, no, that's not safe.
Well, was there even a place to run to?
Well, just off the hill,
Yeah.
off the mountain. And I don't know what happened. Some of them, I guess, got killed running off the mountain. But I managed to I'd sit there with the book and I don't remember what I read, and I read the same page over and over about 20 or 30 times that day. You know, trying to, you know, little candle in there to read by, and try not to panic, try to hold it together, try to, you know, tough it out. And I guess I was down there, my mate for the bunker left, and I don't know where he went, and I was down there by myself for 3 days, trying to stay awake and falling asleep, and trying to figure out the enemy was coming up the mountain at any time, and you know, and I would have still been down there until the enemy come up if somebody hadn't thought to send somebody around to all the bunkers to make sure everybody is out.
Okay, so basically you're the last weeks of the Ripcord campaign. There's a period there in July of 1970 when essentially there's regular bombardment happening, and you're pretty much pinned down in the bunkers most of the time.
Well, we came out and did stuff and then run to other bunkers.
Right.
I was cleaning up on the top of the hill some stuff and taking it to the side of the hill, the top of the hill, and throwing it off. This was after the explosion, everything blew up. And we'd get incoming rounds and I would run in this bunker. But that one day, a series of things happened. I don't know how. But 4 or 5 guys, I guess they were rear echelon people because they had no sense to walk all the way down there in a group. You know, and it really irritated me. And we got incoming. They ran into the bunker that I was using. So I went across the top of the hill to the bunker on the other side, and it was not a very well built one, and I thought, this is really dumb. Through all this explosion, you're running across the top. And then when I all clear and came out, they took a direct hit right in the doorway. It killed 2 or 3 and injured a whole bunch of others, and I would have been one of those. And just because I got angry that they were all lollygagging around coming down the top of the hill like they were back on the home on their block.
Mhm.
You know, I knew they weren't infantry. The infantry wouldn't have walked all together like that. So, and I just really irritated me, but I wouldn't go in there.
Okay. Now, was this on the last day, or
No, it was
a couple days before
a
that?
couple days more, because then they told us to get in our bunkers and stay there.
Yeah.
And then I stayed there a couple days and by myself, you know. And
Now, was it normal to have just one man in a bunker?
no, I was supposed to have two, but I don't know what happened to the one that was in there with me.
Mhm.
He may have run off the mountain. He may have gotten killed. I don't know. There was nobody to talk to, and I didn't have a radio to contact anybody, and I was just down there, and that was my post.
Okay.
And that's where I had to stay.
All right. And so we get to the last day, which was July 23rd at that point, and they evacuate the hilltop.
Yeah.
So you were just there, and somebody came to get you?
Yeah, somebody came around they sent somebody around to all the bunkers, checked to make sure everybody was out,
Mhm.
and come down there and said, "What the hell are you doing here? We're leaving.
Mhm.
Get up to the top." So I got all my stuff together and my rucksack and everything, and I thought my legs were all shaky from fear that they would leave me.
Mhm.
And I started up the trail, and I thought that's really stupid, because you can't go around the side from bunker to bunker because you don't have the strength in your legs,
Mhm.
you know. And about halfway up, I was looking around, and there was no sign of anybody, and I thought they had left me, and I kind of gave up for a minute. And I just kept wondering why they didn't lob something in on me or kill me. You know, I was a perfect target. I didn't know at that time that the Viet Cong were coming up the mountain at that time. And so they stopped firing on us for fear of killing their own men.
Okay. So there was no incoming fire then at the point when you were scrambling on the
nothing.
hill?
It was just dead quiet.
Okay.
And I almost gave up. I had the moment of giving up. And then I decided, I don't know, something kicked in, and I decided, this is not where I'm going to die. And I cussed myself, move it, move it 1 foot after another. Come on, you can make one more step. And I did that all the way up to the top, crawling along real slow. And when I got to the top, 2 guys ran out and grabbed me and ushered me into the bunker up there. Lieutenant said, "Get to the back, drop everything, get back up here in line." So I went back there. I put long range patrol in this pocket. I put my wallet with all my family pictures in this. I put on a canteen. I put 2 bandoliers of ammo. I grabbed my thump gun, and I grabbed my M16. And I went up there, and he said, "Drop all that. You can't take that with you." And I said, "The hell I can't." Now, where do you go from despair to total anger? And I said, because if that helicopter gets shot down and I'm not dead, I'm walking out of here. I've got my map, I can do it. And I just knew that I would do it. I knew that I could go out in nighttime because I had terrific night sight. In fact, when there was only stars, I could see the enemy on another hilltop moving around. Other people, I thought everybody could see that well, but they apparently can't.
Okay.
And I just knew that I was going to get out of there alive if it didn't kill me. And then the helicopter was coming in. He didn't have time to argue. He said, "Go," and I ran out there and jumped on the helicopter before it even hit the ground. And 4 or 5 guys jumped on top of me.
Mhm.
And they bounced and took off down the side like that. An explosion went off, and I thought, we're hit. We're going down. And then the next thing I know, they were coming up and going out through the valley. And I thought, wow, I thought we were hit, you know. Then everybody got off me and sat up, and I was able to sit up and look around. And I thought, this is, you know, when I was up there, there was only about 10 or 12 people left in the bunker. So I know that there was only one more slick coming in. Those helicopter pilots, they're the bravest people I've ever heard of. They kept coming no matter what.
Okay.
They got us out no matter what.
Now, were they getting fired on?
All the time. They were getting hit. I remember one coming towards the mountain, and I said, "Everybody get down, he's been hit. You know, I don't know if he'll make it." He just barely made it over the lip before he conked out, you know, but you could tell he'd been hit. So they came in, I don't know, I've never seen anything that brave before. They came in and they got us wherever we needed them.
Okay. So when you were making your trip from the bunker back to where the helicopters and stuff were coming, so that part you were not taking fire. That was just quiet. But once you get over to the side, I guess when the helicopters came in, did they all start shooting?
That's when they came in. They had it all marked out. They had it all zeroed in to that pad, and they would come in low and they would come up on top like that and set down. And I jumped on it before it even set down, and the 4 or 5 guys jumped on top of me. It bounced and off it went.
Right.
And the explosion went off, and I thought, we're hit. We're going down. But that was on purpose. They went down low and went out to the valley.
Yeah, and I guess before you left the bunker, when you were still down there in the bunker line, did you see any Vietnamese out there?
No, I kept thinking they would be coming up the mountain soon because we didn't have anything to protect us, you know, other than the perimeter guards. And they never did. And I thought that was odd. And I thought it was odd that nobody was shooting at me while I was making it to the top, because I was a good target. You know, I was moving very slow. I had the most dreaded case of wobbly knees the whole way up there. I thought, you know, they're gone. They left me. You know, there's not a single person in sight, not a helicopter coming in, not a sound. I've been left. I don't know what I was going to do.
Okay. So now you've made it back, and you get back to Camp Evans. Now what happens?
I stood on the pad. We were told to go to the company, but I couldn't leave until I saw the others come in. You know, I just stood out there and watched the helicopters come in to see if all of our men came in and everything. I couldn't leave it. I felt like, why me? I'm here safe. They're still out there. So, and then we had to turn in all our weapons and everything and go to our company, and then they took us to Eagle Beach.
Yeah, it's lovely.
For a sort of R&R. That's the first time we got an R&R. That was already in July, from January to July. You know, that's the first time we had to sit down, you know, stand down. And that month they sent all of my money. No, it wasn't that month. Yeah, it was. They sent all my money home. I had an allotment for my widowed mother. And they sent all my money home that month, and I didn't have, and so the guys shared up some money. And because I didn't drink beer, because beer made me sick, one of the officers kept going in and getting me a highball and bringing it out to me so I would have something to drink, you know.
So he could get liquor in the officers' club, but you couldn't get it.
You couldn't get it in, you know.
Enlisted club. Yeah.
I'm 23 years old at that time, but not allowed to have, you know, hard liquor.
All right. Now, after the little R&R kind of period there, do you go back out in the field again?
For a long time, we were supposed to wait until we got more people in, and they kept having us do little things and training and all kinds of stuff. It was just to keep us moving, you know, and finally, I guess we went back out sometime in August, but we didn't go all of, they had such bad weather, they trucked us out and dropped us off out there in the foothills, the rolling hills. We didn't go back up in the mountains right then. And then my R&R came up, and I was called back in to do my R&R. And I had purposely put down R&R for September so I could get Australia, because I thought, well, that would be great to see Australia, but the previous company clerk sold it to somebody else.
Oh.
And I wouldn't take R&R. I said, if I can't go there, I'll just sit here for a week. I don't care. It's not a big deal. No, you had to go someplace. Well, I'm not going to Bangkok, and I'm not going to that. Some of these guys came back with some dirty diseases that they couldn't cure, and I'm not. Of course, mostly it's because I was a virgin, so I wasn't going to go do that activity. It felt so sleazy. So they said, well, if you got somebody that could come meet you in Hawaii, we'll send you there. And I said, the only person I got is my mother, and I don't know if she'd come. They sent out the paperwork and everything, and she met me in Hawaii, and we palled around on the Hawaii. The people there wouldn't let me buy or pay for anything. Everywhere I went, no matter whether it was a store or anything, they just kept saying, oh, no money, no. And we went to see Don Ho, and for my mother's age, she was a good-looking woman. And being a widow, Don Ho had somebody come out and ask her if she'd come up on stage with him. He had a bar in the back. So and he kept her up there for hours, and I'm like, when do I get my mother back? And he was, it looked very intimate. It was kind of embarrassing. My mother's being romanced up there by Don Ho, and are they not going to give her back? Do I discreetly leave and pick her up later? Well, I don't know what's the protocol, So eventually they sent her back, and they had taken pictures up there and gave us the pictures of her out there with so that she'd have a memento. And it was very interesting, and we went to a few nightclubs and saw some acts. I got to see the what do they call that? It's a famous bar there that all the celebrities went to. It was right in the it was right in one of the main hotels or something. I can't think of it now, but I went in there and I thought, this is where the celebrities meet. It's so tiny. It's just a bar, and there's no tables, and stretches on down to the end, and it was at the I can't even think of the hotel we stayed in. It was right there on the beach. So it was I enjoyed the time we spent there.
Okay.
It was the first time I was able to get any news of anything going on. Like, if I hadn't heard anything since July of '69, had no idea what was happening in the world.
Right.
Never heard of Kent State. And even to this day, somebody will say something about in the past, and I'll think, I don't remember that. Wait a minute, was it 1970? Yeah, that's why.
Yeah. Vietnam.
It's like you lost a year of memory. So.
Okay. And then what was it like having to go back to Vietnam at that point?
Well, it was kind of sad. I thought, well, you made it this far. Maybe you've got a little luck still. I figured it was about 50% luck and 50% know-how. And that's kind of modest, not very modest, but it's the way I felt about it, and so we went back there. We went up in the mountains for a while and patrolling around, and not much happening. And the next thing I know, they were calling for me to go back early, and then they put me on perimeter and they processed me, and we were out there for a couple weeks, I think, and this Indian guy, Gabe Usla, I remember his name because he saved my life. When I first met him, he was shipped out there, and he went around and talked to a lot of people, and got to me and asked me questions about things, and apparently whatever I said was right, because then from then on he stuck close to in our troop. He was looking for the best possibility for himself, and I understand that. I wouldn't want to be with some of those. GIs are dangerous, especially if they don't know what they're doing or they do something stupid. We had a guy carrying a claymore, always putting it out at night. And I said, don't do that, get rid of that. That's dangerous. You go out there one of these times, they're going to booby trap it. Oh no, I look it over pretty careful. Went out there one time, blew up, he was dead. It was very shocking, you know. I shared a nighttime position with them, and then they put his body in a bag, and this sounds a little insane. I spent the night talking to him. They're crazy.
You mentioned the fellow you said he saved your life.
Gabe, one of the newcomers came in, they thought they heard a noise and they popped a grenade. I'd already lost hearing, I didn't hear it. And they threw it, only they threw it over at us. Because the positions, one was out a little further than the other. Threw it over to us, he pushed me in the foxhole and jumped in on top of me and exploded, and all kinds of rocks and everything came down on us. And I thought, oh my God, I made it this far and then die because of some cherry over here that doesn't, you know, scared of the dark.
So this is stuff when you were on perimeter duty, like at the very end?
Yeah, this is just before getting sent home, and I thought, how tragic is that? How tragic is that when, you know, you make it all this way and then some cherry blows you away with a grenade. And Gabe got out his knife and he went up there to kill him. Because that's the way you were at that time, you were just nuts, you know, but the patrol got down there first and got him away. And he came back and he said, they took him away, I didn't get a chance to kill him, you know. But in normal talk, like that would be something normally you would do. You know, you just normally would just kill him.
At what point was your hearing damaged?
On the fire base.
Okay.
Well, it started over that explosion that went off on 805, and this ear was facing it, and that's the worst ear. But after 11 hours of concussion and everything, of explosions and everything, I just noticed after that I couldn't hear my watch tick, and I didn't hear a lot of things. And I thought, well, it's probably good that we're getting close to the end, because you know, at night you need to hear your hearing really bad in case anybody's trying to sneak up on you. And I had an excellent hearing and excellent sight before that. So I would have probably been just sitting there until the grenade went off, because I didn't hear it. He heard it, and he pushed me in there and jumped on top of me, and I'm forever grateful to that man. He was a Zuni Indian, and we became friends, you know, before that. And we took a perimeter guard together, you know.
Okay. Was that sort of the last adventure you had in Vietnam?
Yeah. Then they sent us on one of those big, fat-looking planes down to Hue and processed us, and I didn't sleep for days. And I have pictures of me, the circles under my eyes, you know. And everybody was trying to be nice on the flight, you know, and they took pictures with us and stuff, the ladies on the flight, the stewardesses, and you know, we were joking and carrying on, and like when they're getting ready to take off, everybody raise your legs, you know, kind of like we're helping get off the air, off the ground. And it was, we flew to Guam, and then from Guam we flew to Seattle. And then I thought it was very funny. It was like they wouldn't let you go anywhere. They kept you bottled up, and then they escorted us to the airport and took us in there with the, you know, like they're going to process it, get them processed through, and put me on a plane, and they put me on first class, and I flew from there to Denver, and I didn't even get a chance to notify anybody, you know, and then they put me on another plane, and I finally fell asleep, but apparently I was moaning and carrying on and everything, and they kept waking me up, and I was like, why are you waking me, you know? Sir, you're making a lot of noise. And I didn't know I was making a lot of noise, you know. And got home and found that my mother had given away a lot of my stuff because she had the idea I wasn't coming back.
Lovely.
Sold my baby grand piano, gave away a lot of my clothes. I had a comic book collection, and I was sorry to see that go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, from when I was just a small kid, I collected them. They were all in, you know, I kept them in real nice shape and everything. I just, I thought that was just odd
Mm-hmm.
that she had given up hope or something that I would come back.
So like after she'd been out to see you in Hawaii, that
Yeah.
she did all that?
Yeah.
Maybe
Maybe it was a protective thing, you
Yeah.
know, that she needed to protect herself because she had bouts of depression and everything, and maybe she just needed that to think that and get it done and stop worrying or something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I felt a lot of sadness for my mother. She made a lot of trouble for herself. Life was not good
Mm-hmm.
to her. It could have been better, but she just gave in to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that I had the opposite. I won't give in to anything. I didn't know I didn't know that about myself. I didn't know that I was just that stubborn, that I wouldn't give in at all, you know. And when they sent me, I got a leave after Christmas, and then they sent me to Fort Hood,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted to play war games, and I said, this is stupid. So I went over to the captain, and I said, hey, I hear you're having trouble organizing KP help. I could take it over and I could run it,
Mm-hmm.
and you won't have a lick of problem, you know. And he said, okay, go ahead. So I did. I called in certain people from the field that wanted to come in. I had a list of more people that wanted to come in, and I made up the schedule, and I said, you only get one script, and you go back to the field. Somebody else is in here,
Mm-hmm.
3 men on, 3 men off. You work 3 days on, 3 days off, and do what you want, but you better be here when it's time. And no griping, and you work your butt off, and you clean and you scrub pans and everything. The cooks were happy. They were just, this is wonderful, you know. And then I was sitting outside reading because we would finish up our work early and go out and take a break.
Mm-hmm.
And the sergeant came by and said, told me to get over there and pick up this trash and take care of that. And I said, no. And he said, oh yes. And I said, oh no. And I got up and I walked into the thing and I knocked on the captain's door and I said, look, if this is going to work, we're not going to be doing other duties.
Mm-hmm.
And he told the sergeant, leave them alone. He liked that I had it arranged that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Where does a Spec 4 get the idea to just say no to somebody?
Mm-hmm.
You know, get that
Well,
stubbornness.
My impression is that people coming back from Vietnam at least sometimes did. There were things they weren't going to put up with anymore. And
Yeah, you had your chance to kill me. You
Yeah.
didn't kill me.
Mm-hmm.
I expected to die.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had already figured that's it. You're going to die over there. That's it. Or you're going to come back. Well, when I took that shrapnel in the back, I couldn't feel my legs for a few moments, and I hit it and knocked it and got it off my back. It was burned through 3 shirts that I was wearing, and burnt me on the back and made me for a moment paralyzed. And I thought, oh God, please don't let me be paralyzed, you know. And then they wanted me to come in off the post, and I wouldn't do it. And I was like, this is not hero stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Don't come out here. Don't come out here. You're letting everybody know where we're at. And they did anyway, and I thought, well, I can't argue because that's just making more noise, so I went in, you know. They wanted me to go back and say, well, you won't get a Purple Heart unless you go back. And I said, who gives a shit?
Mm-hmm.
You know, let me just put some salve on it. If it's not better in the morning, I'll go back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he did. Dressed it out there, and the medic did, and then the next day it didn't look so bad, and I never went back in. They just kept checking it every day, you know. Wasn't gonna do it.
How would you characterize the morale of your unit while you were in Vietnam?
Well, I don't know about. There were some newcomers that came in that seemed to me that they were living in a kind of fantasy world. Oh, don't worry, it's going to be over any week now. They're talking peace talks. It's going to be over. I don't need to worry about anything. And then, you know, we had one in our platoon for a while. I traded him off to somebody else because he sat down and said, I can't climb this hill any further. And I went out, I broke my cardinal rule because I went back down there after I unloaded my pack and went back down there and got him up and took his pack, and I pushed him up to the top of the hill, and I told him off all the way up there, you know. And he later went down the wrong trail and got blown up. I don't know whether he died from it, I don't know. He certainly didn't last very long in Vietnam. But I could tell he was in a fantasy world, and you know, he didn't take it seriously, and I traded him off. I said, get him away from me, because otherwise I'll kill him. You know, and I was serious. You go a little nuts out there, you know. He was a danger to us.
Yeah. So morale was sort of, people just didn't engage reality. I mean,
My morale of the people that was in my platoon was pretty good, but then we avoided everything that we could. And I didn't want me to die, and I didn't want any of them to die. And I realized if you take control here, now they depend on you. And if they get hurt, it's because of you. And that I took that very seriously. I worked 24/7 for the whole time I was there to make sure that nothing happened.
Okay, this tape is about done, so we're going to pause here. And I guess we've been talking, I'd asked a question sort of about morale, and you were talking about your own unit's morale, your platoon's morale was pretty good.
My troop was, we were pretty happy together. I used to get care packages from home, and my brother would slip in some whiskey and stuff, and we'd be sitting around at night, and I'd share that with them. We'd all have a toast that they were still alive. I just want to say that it sounds like I'm bragging here, that all this stuff, but I don't really understand how a kid can grow up being pretty much a sissy, can suddenly turn into this other person that I didn't recognize. I didn't know this person. This person was stubborn. This person was, I'll make damn sure that we're going to do this. We're going to, you know, I would just become this other serious 24/7, by golly, if it's up to me, we're all going to live.
Now, did you never have a lieutenant in your platoon?
No.
So you just, and now you had the sergeant, and did he go away eventually and get replaced by another sergeant?
Replaced by another sergeant who I threatened to kill, because he said, we're not going up and down any more mountains. We're going down this path. And I turned around, took my gun off safety, and I said, first of all, you're going to shut the fuck up, or I'm going to kill you right now. And I didn't say it loud. I just said it in this voice, and I meant it. And something in my face, I know that face. That face is my father's face that will make your bowels liquid. And I used it later when I became a teacher. And scared the principal. He came in to view my classes. Somebody decided to act up, and I gave the face. And when I gave the face, the kid scrunched down in his chair, and the principal got up and left. And I thought, that's funny. Why would he leave? He was only here 5 minutes. How can he do my class? And I went down there, and the other principal said, oh, he turned it over to me because you scared him. I'm like, what? And my son told me, I know that face. I've seen that face on you. You scare people with that face. And it was my father's face. I knew that face, but I could never duplicate it in a mirror or anything. I was not being brave. I didn't see myself as a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm a practical thinking person that wants to stay alive, and I'll do whatever necessary to stay alive, you know. So it sounds like I'm bragging, but I still to this day want to understand where that person came from. Where did that person come from that all this stuff happened to you, the right and left of you, and the only scratch you got was a burn on the back from shrapnel. You know, people were dying right and left. And there's times out there I thought I would gone crazy. And 30-some years later, when they threatened to get rid of our insurance go up real high, everybody talked me into going to the VA and seeing if I couldn't get there, you know, and so they questioned me about my hearing, and then they started really questioning me about Firebase Ripcord and what happened to your hearing and everything up there on that Firebase. And I had a flashback and I meltdown, and how can you have a meltdown 30 some years later, almost like it was yesterday, and I couldn't make it stop. It came in waves and I couldn't make it stop. And they kept saying, oh, you have post-traumatic stress. And I'm like, no, I don't have anything. I'm okay. I just can't make this stop. And they kept passing me from person to person. They kept saying that. And finally sent me to a psychiatrist. And she said, I said, I looked into DSM. I'm not alcoholic. I'm not drug user. I don't have fits of violence. I don't do, you know. And she got it out and said, this is what you looked at? And I said, yes. She said, turn the page. I turned the page and I fit all of this subcategory. I thought, oh shit, I've got post-traumatic stress and I'm still having meltdowns from it. How do I stop this? You know, and she said, you need to talk about it. You need to talk about it. Anybody will stand still and hear the story. And I can do that now a lot better, because at first it'd make me cry. I would cry all the time when I tried to talk about it. Get real emotional over it, you know, and I thought, I don't know whether it's any good. I asked her, does this go away? And she said, well, it's kind of ingrained in your mind after all this time. I don't think that we can get rid of it, but we can teach you coping mechanisms. And so I learned coping mechanisms to cope with it, you know. Coming here, I didn't know whether I could do it. I said, I'm going. I said, it's probably going to scare the shit out of me. I was sick for the first couple hours of the drive up from San Diego. Then when I got to about halfway, I started feeling better and got here. And
is this the first reunion you come to?
I went to the one in Fort Worth when I was living in Texas. But to travel anywhere, always, or to go outside my comfort zone. But I did get stuck once in my apartment with agoraphobia, and I knew that I had to keep pushing the envelope. So what I used to go by is something I read someplace. It said, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And then I go out and do it. You know, but it helped. It kept me from coming unglued. You know, I kept going places by myself and pushing the envelope as far as I could push it. I didn't know whether I would make it here. I thought, this is going to be very embarrassing if I get about halfway and turn back. You know, and I was sick. I thought, I'm sick, I don't think I can go. And, you know, it's like, you know, grow up, grow a pair, you know, go. And I did, and I thought, you know, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm afraid, I'm frightened, I'm going to do it. And when I got here, I was just fine.
Yeah.
I was worn out, tired, slept good that night, you know.
So it's a good group.
Huh?
It's a good group here.
It is a good group. These are men that I served with, although I tried to block out most of it so I don't remember the names and faces like I should. You know, it's like when I came back, I decided that I was going to just pack it up and put it in a corner in my brain, in a closet, and pretend it didn't happen.
Right.
And that's what I did. I had nightmares, and I would wake up in the middle of the night and in a panic and want to run, and no place to run. And I would get up and read until morning, you know, and everybody thought that was odd. I was very dependent on the word fuck. I loved the word fuck. I used it all the time. It scandalized my family, you know. They didn't know who I was, and I think I scared them a bit, you know, because they sent away this little wimpy kid, and he come back, and I seemed to be very aggressive. You know, how did that happen? When did that happen? And everybody, I'm not used to saying thank you for your service and pat me on the back and say you were a hero. No, don't say that. You want to see heroes. Look at those chopper pilots that came in there, knew they would come in there under fire to come and get us. That's a hero. you know. I did what I did to survive.
Mm-hmm.
I did what I did to make sure nobody around me got killed because of me
Mm-hmm.
doing something stupid. So that's not hero material. That's just practicality. That's just someone doing what they have to do to survive.
Mm-hmm. Which is ultimately what winds up leading you to do things that people can later label heroic in a lot of cases. You weren't doing it for that reason, you were just doing it.
You're scared to death and you still do it.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that when you got back and you got out of the Army, you were a different person. So what did you then do? You got out of the Army. Is that when you went to school then, or?
Well, I went back to school. I got my degree.
Mm-hmm.
I got a regular degree because everybody at that time was saying if you got a teacher's degree, it wasn't really a degree. So I thought, well, because I have such stubbornness and pride in myself that I'm getting a regular degree
Mm-hmm.
and fill it in with my electives with teaching credits and
Mm-hmm.
everything. And then I had to leave that because both my wife and I got sick and we had the baby, and so I had to go work for my brother doing aluminum siding, and then I got a job on the railroad, and I worked on the railroad for 5 or 6 years, and then Reaganomics killed that, and I come back to Texas and fought through depression and you know, I got myself together and went to see a counselor who counseled me that I should go back to my original plan, which was to become a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So I got the last 12 credits and got me a job over in Fort Hood.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that may seem crazy to go to an Army camp
Mm-hmm.
when I didn't want to have anything to do with the Army, but they were paying the most amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wanted to teach over that. And it was great. I loved it. But I did avoid going out on, if I could all avoid it, if they had some sort of thing going on out at Fort Hood, I'd ask somebody else to take my place and go, you know, and so I didn't go. But I got the best job I could and suffered a divorce right there at the beginning, and stayed because I wanted to make sure my son, this was my kid, I raised him. I diapered him, I bathed him, I fed him, and I did everything for him because my ex-wife was a little depressed at that time, and she didn't really want a child, you know, and so he was my baby.
Mm-hmm.
I put him in a Snuggly. You had to buy a Snuggly through the Whole Earth catalog at that time. Covered the baby completely. You couldn't see it unless you were taller than me to see there's a baby in there. You know, I stooped over to get something at a store, and some lady saw I had a baby in there and screamed at me and run off to call the police because I was abusing that baby. And I'm like, no, it's like being back in the womb. He loves it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's all nice and warm in there, and he can hear my heartbeat, and I run a higher temperature, and so he's like, it's like just a blanket.
Mm-hmm.
So I stayed to raise him, make sure he didn't become a dirtbag, make sure he went to college, became a teacher, and started out teaching math, but I was a little bit too good at that because all my students passed the exit exam, and that was not so good because everybody else only had 60%. And I guess they were afraid that this would cause a stampede for parents wanting their kids in my class or something, I don't know. They asked me to move over to social studies and gave me 4 preps for, 4 different classes to teach for my efforts. And I went down there and said, you don't have a psychology class, could I teach a class in psychology? And they said, that's 5 preps, are you nuts? And I said, yes, give me it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they gave it to me. Within a couple of years, that's all I was teaching is psychology, sociology, and then finally just psychology, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it was not, here's something funny. I decided that my class would be a give and take. We're not going to discuss, you're not going to learn dates and all that. You're going to talk to me about Freud. What do you think about dreams? You think they mean anything? You got to have an opinion in here or get out. You're going to have an opinion. And sometimes it felt like I was on the edge of chaos conducting this, and any minute now it was going to go into a riot. And the best compliment I ever got is a teacher came down and knocked on my door after lunch and said, "What the hell goes on in here?" And I've been teaching, this was back when they were not teaching sex education. I was teaching sex education in the one chapter, because we'd already had 2 students turn up with HIV. And I decided nobody needs to die for lack of information. So I was teaching a very outward everything about sex. No matter how red my face was, I was going to teach that. And I figured that she had heard something, and now this is when I got fired for this. And I said, "What do you mean? What happened?" And she said, "I was just down in the lunch hall, and a group of your students are arguing over Freud down there." And I thought, well, is this a bad thing? Well, they never argue in my class over anything down there. I'm like, well, I just wind them up and send them out there into the world. You know, I would do things to provoke them, to get them into arguments over things, to make them see that psychology is in your life every day. So I enjoyed it. It was a little radical. But here's the thing. I read this book when I was about 18 or 19 called "To Serve Them All Our Days" by Rodney Danderfield.
Delderfield. Yeah.
Delderfield.
Yeah.
I stole all his ideas. And it wasn't until sometime later I read the book again, I thought, oh my God, I thought I had all these ideas myself. And I just stole them from this guy that come back from war and became a teacher. And I thought, well, that serves me right, you know, thinking that I was really something, you know, to do all this. But it was great fun. I enjoyed it. So that's part of what I did. I went back to school and got that degree, and I got the job teaching, and I stayed with it for over 20 years. And then I just, we got a whole new bunch of officers in, the superintendent and the assistant superintendent, and they, at that time I was counseling students, and they felt that we weren't doing enough. And they loaded us down with a lot of secretarial jobs. And I said, have you read the state manual? It says I'm supposed to counsel 55% of the time. Do you know I have got 7 students who were on suicidal ideation? I had to get their parents in here and get them off to the funny farm so that they wouldn't kill themselves. I got 4 more I check on every day, different times during the day, to see when they cross over. I've got all the teachers alerted to send me anybody that is acting funny, that they might, you know, were depressed and now they're suddenly happy, because that means they figured out a way to kill themselves. And I thought, you know, nobody's perfect, and I don't think I could bear it if one of my students killed themselves and I didn't catch it. So I just said, you know what, if that's the way you're going to be, I'm just going to retire. I can sit at home for more than half my salary, and I don't have to worry, so, you know. It's a lot of worry. You don't know how vulnerable these kids are. You don't know until you counsel them and find out so many of them are fragile, especially with your parents over in Iraq or in some distant land where they could die at any time and they don't know what will happen to them. So, oh well, that's, you know, that was, I loved the career and I would have stayed, but I just couldn't deal with not taking the time to talk to every student 3 or 4 times during the year. I had 350 students and I had to contact them all at least three times during the year to make sure, not only for college and scholarships and socioeconomic things and see how they were doing, socializing, but you know, all this other stuff too.
Yeah.
So my dad told me when I was about 21 that I was a two-spirit person. I didn't understand it. He said, don't be afraid of it, don't be ashamed of it. You're a two-spirit person. You always nurture wherever you go. I thought that's an odd thing for my father to say, and I don't know what it means, and I didn't want to ask because it was one of those Indian things, you know, that he was fond of saying it from time to time, you know, that was just kind of creepy, you know. So maybe I am a two-spirit person, I don't know. I've mentored all my life. In every job that I've ever had, I was a teacher. So it just came natural to me.
Mm-hmm.
They always send them to me to teach.
Now, how much of that do you think goes back to what sort of happened to you in the Army?
Well, the Army changed my life radically. I really do. I think it changed my life radically. I would never been the person I am today. You know, people say, oh, I wish that didn't happen to me. Well, yeah, on the one hand, it was terrible. I lived through it, and I changed. I no longer was willing to be stepped on and stomped on and pushed to the side. Now I fought back. You know, let's go Duke City. You know, you want to criticize me? All right. I had a assistant principal that hated my guts. She was always trying to get me fired. I kept good records. When they'd be down the office to see the principal, and some complaint or other, and I'd get out and I didn't say she was a liar. I didn't say, you know, I said, well, I'm sorry, but you've been misinformed. Here's what really happened. After a while, the principal got tired of it. I guess he said, no more. You know, stop this. Whatever it is, I don't know why you don't like him, but leave him alone. And so that was the end of that, you know. It's just, I tried to teach everybody around me that when parents come in distraught, do not escalate, de-escalate. And same in the classroom. You're a teacher, you can make it worse or you can make it better. Don't give them an ultimatum. Say, here's the choices, you choose. What do you want to do? You know, calm down, get back in the swing of things. You want to go down to the office? You want to time out? You know, what do you want to do? But I won't put up with anything. You know, go around any corner. I got 2 degrees in psychology. I'll be waiting there for you. You know, I will outsmart you in every way. Don't try me. I'm a Vietnam vet, you know. I'm mean. We can have it sweet as pie, or we can have it mean. Your choice. You know. And I never had trouble in my classes like everybody else had. I don't, you know, I just, I thought, give them a choice. Let them choose for themselves. They want to go down the office, that's fine. I'm not angry over it. Sometimes you need a timeout. You know, sometimes life just overloads you. And you bring that to my classroom and maybe you need a timeout. Tell me if you don't want to be called on today. You need some time to just contemplate. Okay, I won't call on you. You know, let's not make it a habit, but I mean, if you're having an overwhelming day, just, and if you want to talk, I'm here. I'm always here. And my classroom is like Vegas. What happens here stays here. And anybody who spreads any rumors, you're out of here. You go around what you hear here, you know. And you have to be sensitive to where they're going, because sometimes you have to stop them and say, wait a minute, I think I know where you're going. Think a minute, is that something you want to share? If it's not, we need to stop here. And you know why? I'll tell you a real happening. The guy across the hall taught biology, and he was having a really good time that day, and he was talking about reproduction. He was telling all the chemicals in sperm. And the little girl raised her hand and she said, Mr. Kutai, well, I shouldn't say his name, said, that's all sugars, isn't it? And he just like, yeah, you get it. It really is. It's all sugars. And then he didn't see where it was going, and she said, how come it tastes so salty? He went outside, closed the door, and fell down laughing. He didn't know what to do. I said, you've got to think down the road where this might lead. And I'm sure that girl didn't want to share that. I'm sure that it was all over school that she shared that. You've got to stop them before they incriminate themselves. You know, think a minute, is that something you want to share? Because I think I know where you're going. And they would say, no. Good, move on, let's go on, you know.
Yeah. Well, that one might have blindsided me, but.
Well, it blindsided him. I felt sorry for him. I thought, I don't know whether you could have prevented that one. I really don't. But I just know that you've got to watch out when you're working with these kids. They say things, and a lot of them go home and kill themselves because they think they can't face life now, because they shared too much, they overshared. You know, I closed down program after program or altered programs. They come in every year with training for a week of new stuff that was going to save education, and I would sit there and I see globally, not specifically but globally, and I would see the flaw, and I would try to ask a question as innocently as possible so that it didn't look like I was causing trouble, and it would pull the tapestry apart and they would fall apart, you know. And so they would have to modify it and change to whatever they wanted us to do that year. Well, one year they wanted us to have all the kids journal. Oh, it'll be great, they'll journal. And I said, oh, I think you should think about this. By that time, all the principals from the different schools and all the superintendent and assistant superintendent was always in the back of our training session. Mm-hmm. You know, and every time I thought, well, that's going to get you fired, and it didn't. And I said, this journaling could get out of hand because they may overshare and then they'll go home and kill themselves. Oh no, I don't know why you think things like that. So we went into small groups, and they tagged along to my small group and sat in the back. And the teacher, I told a joke to the other teacher when we were supposed to share something, and she came out there and said, well, how do we not share it with the group? And I said, I don't want to. And she picked up the paper and said, well, what is it that's funny, you know? And I took it back and put it down. And she said, well, I mean, you know, you could share this with everybody. And I took it back. And I said, see, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You have authority, and you're using your authority to get me to share what I don't want to share. And then one of these kids are going to share something, they're going to go home and kill themselves because they overshared. All because of this, because you're not trained to have them journal. And they all got up and left. And I thought, well, now you've done it. You've done it for sure this time. Because they're going to just throw you out of here any minute now. All that because I'm teaching sex ed too. Mm-hmm. And all that 10 years or 12 years that I did it, nobody said anything. And I don't know why. Next day, we were told to go to our rooms and just work in our rooms because they canceled that. Mm-hmm. We're not going to do journaling.
All right. Well, this story has taken us in a lot of pretty interesting directions. So I think we've gotten a pretty good idea. But you know, it all connects. Which is
well, I'm surprised I got through this without crying. That usually happens somewhere along the line, or being overwhelmed. But I've been trying to follow the psychiatrist that told me to buttonhole anybody that wants to hear and tell them all about it. And then sometimes it does cause tears. And you know, sometimes it shakes me up a little bit. It was an experience. I'm not saying it was a great experience, but it was an experience that changed my life. Mm-hmm. It made me a different person. I don't know whether that's good or bad. You know, I certainly became adamant and stubborn. When my son wanted to quit college, I said, oh no, over my dead body. You're moving back in with me, and you've got a place to live and a place to shower and a place to do your clothes and food that's in the refrigerator, and that's all I can do for you, but you're going back to college, you're going to finish. Mm-hmm. And he did. And I said, and then he said one time, and he said to me, I'm not sure college is a great thing. I don't know whether I can afford for my two boys. And I said, oh no, I want to promise right now that they're going to college. I didn't raise us up out of the gutter for you from trailer park trash to become this and then let them slip back down. Usually the third generation it happens to. And he said, well, I don't see it makes any difference. I said, how much were you making before you went to college? Making $32,000. What are you making now? 110, 120? It's not worth it? You make 3 times what I was making as a teacher. You know, when I started out. And it wasn't worth it. damn right it's worth it. And I don't care what anybody says, education is the key to becoming something better in this life. And I went after it. I came back from Vietnam and I went to college, and I had my family pulling and her family pulling and everybody pulling the other direction. And why are you doing this? And you're not smart enough to do this. You barely made it out of grade school, and you graduated from high school with a D- average. You know, well, there was a reason for that. I didn't know that at the time, but there was a reason for that. You know, but I wasn't going to give up. I wanted to know everything. I thought if I went to college, I would know everything. Turns out I don't even hardly know anything, but I know how to look it up. I know how to find out that information. I know how to research it. You know, that's what education does for you. And I know how to find out information so you can form your own opinion, and you don't sit around being ignorant. You know, I had only a size 10.5 shoe, but I tried to stamp out as much ignorance as I could.
All right. And in the meantime, you filled in another piece of both the story of Firebase Ripcord and told a very good story about what it was like to go through the U.S. military and what it meant. So I'd like to close this out by thanking you for taking the time to share the story today.
I still don't know. I still don't understand all that happened to me there. I still don't understand all of it, what changed and when it changed and how it changed, or how I came to this point. But like Cher, I think that all the things that happen to you make you who you are. And if you like who you are at this point, and I do, then everything was the right thing to happen. So I'll leave you with that.
Yes, that's pretty good.